These are my Dagoos. Aren't they adorable?
Hey guys, this is Chris from Ex Machina, and I've actually tried to post several videos on the current topics that are affecting the industry, but for some reason my recording software it got buggered up, and my two videos basically failed to record. One was on art, one was on the OGL. Now, interestingly, the OGL has changed a little bit with the news, and let's talk about it. Now, for those people who are curious about the history, Deus Ex Machina signed on to the fourth edition GSL. We felt that there was we felt that we were safe in the situation. We didn't believe our IP was under threat. We abided by the rules, and we got a nice spiffy little 4E plaque that we got to put on our books. And we were a staunch supporter of D&D 4th edition, and I know that the legal jargon of the GSL forced a lot of companies out, and it resulted in the creation of 13th Age, Savage World, maybe not Savage World, but definitely Paizo and Pathfinder. So we're now in this current situation where Wizards is obviously threatening, but planning, probably under the advice or under the pressure of their parent company Hasbro, to amend the OGL specifically to accommodate one D&D and numerous other aspects of the industry as it's changing. This includes digital stuff. The 4th edition accommodated some digital stuff, video games and so forth, but obviously this new OGL has to take into account stuff like NFTs and other things that are stupid. But the most important thing is going to be what we can produce and what restrictions we have to follow. And the new restrictions is you have to report your revenue if you make over 50,000. This is very interesting. It feels like it's only in place for them to gauge how much money they can potentially take from us once they realize how much money is out there. So for example, if they find out that it's actually a $200 million industry, because there's so many publishers making over 50,000, they may update the OGL again and say, okay, everyone over 50,000 owes us this amount of money. They are already saying that they want a royalty of 20 to 25% if you make over 750. This got slightly revised, saying it's in the amount above 750. So if you make 750 and $1, you have to pay them 25% of the $1. If you make $1 million, you're paying 25% of $250,000. If that's true, it's not as big as a storm as you might think, but there are a lot of companies that do. I don't say a lot of companies, but there are a few companies in that do not have the capacity to accommodate for that type of restriction. The other thing, and this is the important thing, is that 4th edition GSL did not give Wizards of the Coast the right to take away or control your intellectual property. There was some belief that was in there. It wasn't, and as was one of the reasons why we didn't have a problem. However, that language is in the new 1.1 OGL, where they do say that they gain a royalty-free licensing to your content. That is something that I will not abide by, unfortunately. I'm very, very careful and very protective of my intellectual property and my stories and so forth. So that is not something that I will be abiding by. The problem, however, with this new OGL is that they are including language that revokes all previous versions of the OGL, which is the first time they have done this in 23 years. And this is a very, very big problem. This is a very, very big problem because it sets a precedent that they can cancel and update the OGL whenever they wish. The precedent is pretty dangerous because it means all your products are basically on sketchy ground. Now, it should be noted that even when the 4th edition GSL came out, they made no attempts and no desire to retire the original OGL. And that was the reason why we had this framework in place to create products for 3.5, even when 4th edition came out. And then, once again, it gave rise to a bunch of variant systems, the most dominant one being Pathfinder. Now they're attempting to cancel that system and say you basically have to abide by the new OGL. Now this can be disastrous for companies that are still producing stuff for 3.5, potentially. It is also going to be disastrous for people who are putting out 5th edition products now. Now, people who know us, and you probably don't know our history because it goes back quite a ways, Back in 2008, our first official publication was the D20 Amethyst, the 3.5 version that we released in 2008, a month before the release of 4th edition. We then put out an announcement that was saying we were immediately switching over to the new system. We got contacted by Goodman Games, who offered to publish the first Amethyst Foundations for 4th edition, which ended up getting delayed and not getting released until 2010. And by then, the writing was on the wall and 4th edition was dying. Goodman Games cut ties with 4th edition products, including us. And subsequently, we put out 4th edition products on our own, and we actually had some success, specifically with Ultramodern 4, and the rest is history. However, Goodman Games, one thing about the GSL came out in July, I want to say, early July of 2008. We signed on to it within a few days. But one of the stipulations in the GSL stated that you could not publish any products, I think, until November of that year. Now, for Goodman Games, who were producing a lot of adventures at the time, this was not something they liked, and they wanted to be able to put out adventures immediately. So they did. And this is also something very important. There's a couple of them here I have here. This is one of them, done by Adrian Humble. Also got one here by Harley Stroh. And with the exception of, I think, this one, none of them actually contain any OGL language. This one actually has one at the back. But the other ones seem to lack, I couldn't find them in the other ones at all. And these, by the way, came out before November of 2008, which means technically they're in violation of the GSL. However, it still says 4th edition compatible, because Goodman believed, and he had the legal grounds, and he has obviously a very good legal team, that he could still produce 4th edition compatible stuff without the GSL. Now, eventually GSL became official with them, and in November they started putting out official GSL products. But until then, they were putting out unofficial 4E. Now, technically, this is in complete violation of the OGL. This is a complete violation of the GSL, but they believed they had legal grounds to do it. And that's one of the things I'm basically following. Even if Wizards of the Coast do successfully make an argument that they can revoke the OGL, we simply won't follow the OGL anymore. If it's because, remember, there's technically 3 versions of this OGL. There is this new 1.1, which is more like a GSL 2.0 than anything else. There is the 1.0A 5th edition OGL, which was updated a few years ago, and then you have the original, I do believe, the 3.5 one back in 2000. Which a lot of people are still employing. And the implication that they can cancel a 23-year-old agreement is, like I said, it sets a very dangerous precedent. If it's true that they are not revoking the 3.5, then we will release 5th edition products under the original 2000 OGL, which is entirely doable. If, however, they're saying that one is no longer valid, then we'll simply release products unauthorized. We will do it unauthorized. For people who know us, people have always asked, like, why don't you copy and reprint stuff from the core books? Why do I have to get the core books? And now you're seeing one of the primary reasons why we don't do that. We don't do it because I want to save money on printing costs. So some of these books, especially Ultramodern, will get extremely large, and as a result, very expensive. And as a result, we don't do that. And that's actually helping us in our favor, because we don't copy-paste stuff from the SRD over. We are in much better grounds over someone like Everyday Heroes. Now, the reason why I bring up Everyday Heroes is not just because technically Everyday Heroes is Ultramodern's competition, but the fact that I have been in contact with, I do believe, Dave Scott, who runs Everyday Heroes, and Everyday Heroes does have a complete core book. It does not require the original D&D books. And as a result, he's the one that has, once again, has a lot of content carried over from the 5th edition SRD. He's in a much tighter situation than us. We produce campaign books. Even Ultramodern doesn't have content copy-pasted. I think there is maybe one exception. I think the one exception is that we copy-paste the Burst Fire rules from the Dungeon Master's Guide. I think that is the only time we ever copy-paste a rule. We copy-pasted the Burst Fire rule. One little instance, that's basically it. So there's also something important about the people talk about you can't copyright a mechanic. You can copyright the expression, but you can't copyright the rule specifically. This is true, but there is a lot of gray area regarding what constitutes as an expression. For example, it seems very clear that Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast cannot copyright strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, and so forth. And the basic rules of using a die 20 dice to roll to hit and armor class, so stuff like that. That's going to be very, very difficult for them to try to copyright. They may try. There is apparently some recent news that not only have they've copyrighted Dungeons and Dragons, they have copyrighted the greatest role-playing game, apparently, which some of us have used to kind of refer to D&D without being D&D. I will be removing that language as well. Because is there a possibility that they will copyright the term 5e or 5th edition? That is entirely possible. I don't think they'll get away with it. I don't think they'll be able to really do that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they tried. Now, it should be noted that the problem right now is that the OGL, the original OGL, although it says perpetual, and if you talk to people who wrote the OGL, they absolutely state unequivocally that it was not meant to be revoked. It was supposed to be irrevocable. But because that word is missing, that language is missing from the OGL, Hasbro believes that they can cancel it now. And there's a lot of people on who have talked to legal teams saying they think they can, but if they tried, they're going to have a big legal problem. And is Wizards of the Coast willing to go into this fight? Is it worth it? Somebody made the calculations and said, if you take the top Kickstarters for 5th edition that made over $750K, they are doing all of this for $700,000, which is a lot for people like us. But when you're dealing with D&D, which made $300 million, I think, last year, $700,000 is a drop in the bucket, and it's absolutely not worth it for them to put all this effort into it. So this is a lot. And the funny thing is that the OGL was supposed to come out 2 days ago, and this leak came out instead, which means that something is going down at Wizards right now as we're speaking. Now, by the time this thing goes up, the OGL might have been posted, but currently it hasn't, which means there is some scrambling, some talk going around, figuring out what they should do. And what they should do is come out with an OGL that is irrevocable, that gives us the freedom to do what we want without having to report this stuff to them. They should have a revised OGL that paves the way for us moving forward. If they continue to push this new GSL 2.0, will it cause people to jump ship to other systems? Maybe, but there's still a huge market in D&D. They know that. But what they don't know is that a lot of people believe they have the legal standing to produce products for 5th edition without adhering to the OGL. Now, that could result in legal action from Wizards of the Coast, but are they willing to do it to potentially the capacity out there, which means potentially hundreds and hundreds of publishers all at once? One of the things people need to know, obviously, and this is something that I was talking just recently, my wife and I are very different people. Outside of the obvious, she's shorter, she's got hair, her voice is different, and yet, despite that, we share 99.5% DNA, as does mostly everyone in the human race. And in many ways, you can extend that to D&D and rules in general. If you look at Paizo and Pathfinder, even though it's a very different system in many, many ways, it shares still, I would say, 99% of its DNA with D&D, which means it shares a lot of its DNA with 5th edition D&D. And that's kind of the problem we're at right now. If they're intending to try to prevent people from producing anything from D&D, they are running into a lot of legal grounds, because what constitutes actual infringement? Is it specifically using the term that they've copyrighted, which nobody uses, like Mind Flayer or Beholder or what have you? No, they would actually have to go out and try to copyright all of their terminology in an attempt to destroy the entire third-party industry. And that's going to result likely in a class action lawsuit that's going to cost them a lot of money. So that's kind of the situation we're in right now. What is this Deus Ex Machina going to do? Obviously, we are going to continue moving as before. We have Quintessence just got released, 2nd edition, and Faction 2nd edition is coming out this month. And then we are releasing out Amethyst Revelations. These have not gone to print yet, and we are going to wait for the OGL's official release. And if it does not have language we like, we will delete the OGL from our books, and we will refer to these as unauthorized 5e tombs that are not supported by Wizards of the Coast. If that's how the situation we have to go, then that's the situation we're going to go. If there's legal issues, then we'll deal with it. But we're going to proceed accordingly. We're going to put out Amethyst Revelations this year. We already have 3 other projects, updates for Apex and Neurospasta, and another project we've been talking a lot with people called Heavenfall. And we are going to continue to move these. Will we shift over to other rule systems? If we feel that there is a rule system out there that is as encompassing as 5th edition D&D, we may consider it. But there's unfortunately no market for us to support systems like Savage World, Fate Core, or Pathfinder. The markets are simply too small. We would have to publish these products for multiple systems. And as seen with the original Amethyst Kickstarter back in 2014, that's a nightmare. It's very time consuming, and even counting that, the sales aren't there. And I've said this repeatedly. If you add up the sales of every version of Amethyst, 13th Age, Savage Worlds, Fate, Core, Pathfinder, you add them all together, it is less than Amethyst Quintessence for 5th edition. There are a few other things out there. So, and there's been a lot of lawyers weighing in on this. The most obvious one has been lawyers that say because the word irrevocable is not in the OGL, they can absolutely revoke it. And trying to define expression and rule mechanics in a court case can be very, very tricky. However, there also has been some legal advice from people who are lawyers that have said that if Wizards of the Coast tries to revoke this contract and if it goes to court, the chances of them winning is actually not very high, regardless of whether or not they think they have legal backing, because when you deal with contract law like this, the consignee, which is third-party publishers, are generally more favored, which means the people who write the contract generally lose these cases if there's muddy dialogue or sort of muddy language within the contract. And that's kind of the important thing going forward. Now, it should also be noted that it also depends on the spirit of the open gaming license, and it has been absolutely established by the people who wrote the OGL back in 2000 that it was meant to be irrevocable. It was never meant to be canceled. And that does change things. That does change things because if they say, no, this was how it's supposed to be, open gaming is supposed to be an irrevocable system, that's going to change things a lot. But yeah, so that's the situation we're in right now. Deus Ex Machina is not going to change. Thankfully, because we do very little SRD copying, we don't have to worry too much. And if it comes down to us abandoning the OGL, we will do so, because Deus Ex Machina will not adhere to the confines of the 1.1, primarily because of them receiving a royalty-free access to our content. I am very protective of my IP, and I will not be doing that. This is going to be a very interesting few days until the OGL gets out official and we see the actual legal language and whether or not Wizards and Hasbro are going to dig their feet and stick to this and unfortunately end up making the same mistake which almost killed D&D back with 4th edition. Unfortunately. Is this going to happen? No. 4th edition, D&D wasn't as big as 5th edition is now. And there is, unfortunately, a very large market share of people that do not give a shit about third-party products. They are first-party through and through, and they do not care about third-party at all. But there is a market that will be. Will this affect their bottom line? No. I don't think it will affect the bottom line. But it depends on whether or not they are willing to surf the negativity that's going to come out of this. The other thing to consider in this situation regards the details of how the OGL works and how the SRD works. Now, the OGL and the SRD, the OGL basically gives you access to the SRD, and the SRD is a bunch of rules that you can, if you wish, copy into your text in order to be compliant with this OGL, and allows you to copy-paste stuff from D&D without threats of lawsuit. Now, recently a game came out called Everyday Heroes, which is a D20 Modern update. Ultra Modern 5 is a thematic update to D20 Modern as well. So these two books are I guess you can say competition. They scratch different itches. Ultra Modern is more sci-fi, more range-based, and is designed to be 100% compatible with 5th edition D&D, where Everyday Heroes is meant to stand on its own beast. It's still based off of 5th edition architecture, but it stands on its own. It's its own system. Now, we do not generally copy SRD content over. In fact, I have never selected a section of text from the SRD and copied it into any of our books. Especially if you look at something like Affinity, I don't think there is any SRD content in there. We simply say, refer to official 5e publications, and we move on from there. Amethyst, Amethyst is ultra-modern. There might be. I think if there is, it's one thing only, and that is the burst fire rules out of the DMG, which I have to check. I have to check whether or not we copy pasted those. I think we might have said refer to the official publications for 5e, but I might have put it in there. If it does, I will probably reword it so it doesn't say the same thing but has the same effect. But going what I said about Everyday Heroes is in a slightly different situation because they do copy the SRD text over because they want to be a standalone system where you don't have to purchase another book, which is the reason why their book is 463 pages. And unfortunately, they're in a much bigger bind. In fact, I've been talking with Dave Scott, I think his name is Dave Scott, from Evil Genius Games. And so, yeah, the situation is something that's very tenuous. They're looking at it, and it doesn't hit me as hard because the fact that I use very little SRD content, which means theoretically we can drop the OGL completely from our language and proceed as an unofficial 5e or unofficial unauthorized 5e product. And there would be easier targets for them to go after before they go after us. Because once again, they can easily go after companies that are copy the rules over, including Pathfinder, as not just Everyday Heroes, which is a recent publication, but products that have been out for decades. So there are people in this industry, there are publishers that are much more affected by this than us. But anyway, guys, this has been Chris from DS Machina. Thank you very, very much, and I will update you guys on this the moment we have more information.